Catholic Open Night, where Catholics can ask questions, comment or discuss with Sacerdotus on air. Viewers send your questions or comments. And now here is your host and moderator, Sacerdotus.
Hello, welcome to Mike. Now, shortly, Dean, who joined me last night for ATS Open Mic, will be joining me. I'm going to send him the link, and hopefully, if he's still on, if he's not asleep, he will be joining us. But I just wanted to speak on a few things going on in the church. First, I wanted to address what Pope Francis said women excuse me regarding women deacons. A lot of commotion came about this when I did the comments in an interview. Immediately the media, the other thing the Pope says, took the whole thing out of proportion and just ran with the story, so to speak. They just came and made up their own conclusions that Pope Francis is now going to allow female deacons and whatnot. And just rather people, traditionalists or so-called conservative Catholics and whatnot, labels they love to give themselves. They never bothered to really fact checked what the Pope actually said and did not say. Backtrack a bit. Things started during the International Union of Superior Generals, where superior generals from the church, from different religious orders, from lower the ringtone from this phone, from each religious order pretty much had an audience with the Pope and so forth. Whatnot. So during an interview, the Pope was and the role of women and whatnot. This is what the Pope read it to you right now. This question tends consecrated women already work very much with the poor toward doing, and it touches on the issue of the permanent diaconate. Say that the permanent diaconesses in the life of the church are the mother-in-law. This existed in ancient times. I remember it was a topic that interested me somewhat when I would come to Rome for meetings and stay at the Dominus Paulus VI. There was a Syrian theologian there, a good man who did the critical edition of the hymns of Saint Ephraim the Syrian. I asked him about this, and he explained to me that in the early days of the church there were some deaconesses, or deaconesses, were they ordained or not. The Council of Chalcedon 451 speaks about this. But it pure. What the role of the deaconesses what was the role of the deaconesses at the time? It seems that man told me, who is dead. He was a good professor, wise, erudite. It seems that the role of the deaconesses was to help with the baptisms of women, the immersion. They were baptizing them for the sake of decorum, also to anoint the bodies of the women in baptism. Something curious. When there was a marriage trial, because the husband was beating his wife, and she went to the bishop to complain, the deaconesses were in charge with looking at the bruises left on the body of the woman from her husband's beatings and informing the bishop. There are a number of publications on the diaconate in the church, but it is unclear what it was like. I think that I will ask the congregation for the doctrine of faith to inform me about the studies on this topic, because I have responded to you based only on what I heard from the who was a scholarly and true researcher about the permanent diaconate. And also, I would like to set up an official commission to study the issue. Good for the church to clarify this point. I agree, and I will speak to do something of this kind. Therefore, on the diaconate, yes, I accept, and in a commission that clarifies this well seems useful to me, especially regarding the early days of the church. End quote. So, pretty much as you can see, this was not endorsing women deacons or deaconesses or the ordination of women in any role. Just answering the question and giving his knowledge of what the deaconesses were in the history of the church. So the Pope is not saying that he is allowing women deacons. Story of who bits and pieces of the history of deaconesses in the church. And Pope Francis also admitted his own ignorance on the history of deaconesses. Remember, the Pope, no Pope knows everything. Think that the Pope is like an expert. Then once he becomes the Pope, he is an expert on everything on theology, Catholicism, etc. No. Well, obviously, it's expected for a Pope to have a strong grasp of Catholicism. That is expected. He is also human, and humans forget things. My studies are physics, psychology, philosophy, and biology. And in between all those different curricula, I study different things: art, um, geology. Even had a course on the mafia, on Thomas Paine, on Spanish courses, Italian courses, and whatnot. Now, ask me anything about these courses. I barely remember anything from them, to be honest with you, because they weren't my focus. I just had to take them. They were part of the curriculum to fulfill the requirements for graduation, and also the elective. I chose some classes that seemed interesting to take to find out, what to learn something different. But am I an expert on those things? Absolutely not. So the same thing with the Pope. The Pope, just because he becomes a Pope or may have a theology degree, MDiv, a Master of Divinity degree, which is required for ordination, make this the priest or the Pope or bishop, whatever, an expert on anything, unless he dedicated his academic career towards studying field in theology and the subsections of theology. So Pope Francis was showing that he was not really aware of the deaconesses in the historical perspective, but he gave a pretty good answer. He was pretty much on the money, so to speak, what the deaconesses were in the church. He requested that he said that he might. I want to make that clear because immediately the media was saying that they wanted that the Pope wanted to create a commission to study uh, women deacons, as if he's about to make this change and allow women deacons. And of course, that's a falsehood. That's just not what the Pope actually went. He said, "I think." It's just not set in stone. And again, he just said that that he thinks that he might get the congregation the doctrine of faith to inform him of the study. So he said he wants to ask them to clarify the role of the deaconess. It's not that to study the role so as he could make a decision on whether to allow deaconess or women deacon. It's propaganda from the media that does not understand things. They quickly jumps the gun whenever they hear Pope Francis speak on something in women's ordination. And the Pope made it clear. He said there were a number of publications on diaconate. And they actually are. And like I said, before the Pope is not an expert on everything. No Pope is. And it is true that the role of the deaconess in the church was obscure pretty much. But we know for a fact that it was not holy orders. And what I mean by that is that this title, this role of deaconess in the early church, had nothing to do with holy orders or ordination to the priesthood or diaconate or the episcopacy. So, and it doesn't make sense either way because church we have the seven sacraments, and each of the seven sacraments has in order for it to be valid. These requirements are necessary in order for the sacrament to be conferred, and without these requirements, it won't be effective. It pretty much didn't happen. And the church calls these things the matter and the form, which is what makes a sacrament valid. Ordination, the form, like the formula, the rite, is the laying on the hands and the anointing of the hands by the bishop on the male candidate who's about to be ordained a deacon or priest. Matter is the actual thing that's being receiving the sacrament, in this case, a human being. So the matter has to be the male body. Sacrament of holy orders, the form, the rite, the formula, the laying of the hands, the anointing of the hands, the laying of the hands by the bishop on the candidate, the male candidate, taking of the male candidate's hands by the bishop, the rite, the ceremony, and of course the prayer, asking the Holy Spirit to come on and so forth. The matter is, it has to be a male body, a female, because Christ chose men, the church, and also the theological, the church itself as being the bride of Christ, and Christ is the bridegroom, and the priests represent the bridegroom Christ. A priest is another Christ. The priest doesn't replace Christ. Worship priest or worship the Pope or bishop. The priest and the bishops, the Pope, an ordained priest, and so forth, represents Christ, stands in the place of Christ. So it's like the president has a vice president. When the president cannot attend an event or something, goes and represents the presidency on the president's behalf. Well, it's almost the same thing with the priest. The priest represents people. And in fact, when the priest is celebrating Mass, when he's confirming the sacraments to the people, it's not the priest, it's not the man doing it. It's Christ through the priest things with the people of God. And it's just a puppet, so to speak. But it has to be a man. And again, with the connection, the theological connection, that the church is the bride of Christ, and Christ is the bridegroom. Now, if we ordain women, which is impossible, it just throws the whole thing off, because then it will be a lesbian wedding. Two women, the church, the bride, and then we have another woman representing Christ. It will be like two lesbians getting married. It doesn't make sense. It's completely contradictory. So the holy orders has to be the male body, and the form again is the laying of the hands over the candidate by the bishop, and the anointing of the hands of the candidate by the bishop. So the whole idea of having women deacons is just not possible at all. When you look at it, it's not possible. But of course, the media quickly tried to spin out of the story and just came out with all these conclusions that are not true. And we read in the Council of Chalcedon in Canon 15, it says, quote, "A woman shall not receive the laying on of hands as deaconess under 40 years of age, and then only after searching examination or examination of conscience. And if after she has had hands laid on her and has continued for a time to minister, she shall despise and give herself in marriage. She shall be anathematized, united to her." It just has to do with the way people understood things back in the day and so forth. I'm not going to really go into that, but this is describing the role of the deaconess, that she just ministered. It was almost like a minor aspect. Today we have the lector, person now that goes and reads from the Word of God from the first, second reading, and also the responsorial psalm. Like the Council of Chalcedon in 451. Now the word diakonos in Greek always mean deacon in the clerical sense, like we use it today, the deacon, reverend deacon, and so forth, or reverend mister, whatever. Cana and the scriptures where Jesus performed his first miracle used to refer to the waiters. It was diakonos, deacon, because that word means servant, and in fact, one of the meanings of diakonos or servant, concordance. There is no evidence that the deaconesses in the early church were clergy. Case of Phoebe in Romans 16, verse 1 shows that the word diakonos was used in reference as a servant or helper. But there is no word for deaconess in Greek. It doesn't exist. Centuries later. The document from the Diaconia of Christ to the Diaconia of the Apostle states, and this is from the Courier from the Congregation of Doctrine and Faith, and it says, quote, "At the beginning of the 2nd century, a letter from Pliny the Younger, governor of, mentioned two women who were described by the Christians as ministrae, the probable equivalent of the word diakonoi. The 3rd century that the specific Christian terms diakonisa appeared." And then it continues saying, "The deaconesses mentioned in the tradition of the ancient church as evidenced by the right of institution and the functions they exercise were not purely and simply equivalent to the deacons," end quote. And there's much more, but I don't have time to read all of it. But this document, I advise you to look it up yourself. It's on the Vatican website. Called Diaconia of Christ to the Diaconia of the Apostles, and in 2014. And you can find it on the Vatican website. You can read the whole thing. You can read part 2, which is the long part that I'm not going to read right now, but you can read it yourself. Part 2 towards the disappearance of deaconesses. And it gives you a brief history of the role of deaconesses in the church so that you could understand what the whole thing of the deaconess was about. But a deaconess back in the day was pretty much a woman given the authority to assist the priest and the bishop in things related to other women. So, for example, like I said, like the Pope said, whenever a husband treated his wife, and in those days, the bishop, the church had control power. Well, instead of the woman getting herself naked in front of a bishop, they had the deaconess, the woman, another woman, help her body of the woman and say, yes, this woman was beaten up by the husband. You could see the bruises, blah, blah, blah. So that the bishop, the clergy wouldn't have to be a naked woman, which of course would be very scandalous and obviously can lead to a lot of sinful thoughts. Pretty much the role of the deaconess back in the day, it's safe to say they probably played the role of an altar girl, and you want to make that comparison. the word deaconess, obviously throws a lot of people off because they think of the deacon as the reverend, the clergy role, which deaconess is referring to. They were just relying on the word because it meant servant, a helper, pretty much. So, and like I said, it's also safe to say to describe the altar boy as a sort of a deacon, in the sense that the altar server is a servant that helps, so forth. But the altar server obviously is not a deacon. So that's to clarify the whole situation. Obviously, the church evidence that the church can ordain in any role in regards to clergy, whether deacon or priest. It's just not possible. And church try to do that, it would just be silly. It just contradicts everything that we learned and believed for 2,000 years, and it's just impossible for it to really occur. Now, this doesn't mean that women are not important in the church. In fact, the deaconess was most likely a nun back in the days. Deaconess was a nun. So to make it clear, the Pope did not give any okay that he's going to ordain women to the diaconate, or that he's going to ask the congregation of the doctrine of faith to allow women to become deacons and so forth. That's not what he said at all. So any media reports out there claiming that the Pope is going to start a commission to allow women deacons, it's just nonsense, hogwash. Take a quick break to drink some water to clear, to obviously it's hot in the northeast part of America. It's very hot, and I'm getting a bit dehydrated, as you can hear my voice. So just wait 1 second. I'm also going to check on Dean if he's still around.
Sacerdotus. Hello? Hello? Well, I'll just keep listening to music till you come back on mic.
Okay, I'm back. I just had a little water break. My voice was starting to crack.
Oh, were you already talking before I got here?
Yeah, I just did a little brief, and well, not brief. I mean, how much I lose track of time. Just speaking a bit on the Pope's comment about the women deacons. I just wanted to clarify that out.
I wish
Topic
I had
in
heard it. I wish I had heard it. I didn't hear what you were saying. Could you give me the brief? Can you give me a 2 sentence? Because I bet we agree or are close. I bet.
yeah, just pretty much clarifying the whole situation with the Pope, that he spoke to women superiors in the Vatican, and he gave an interview, and the interviewer asked him about women deacons and whatnot, and he gave a brief history of them, and uh, the comment that he's going to ask the congregation of the doctrine of faith to study the issue of women deacons. And that line right there is what the media took and started spinning, saying that the
I
Pope was
am.
going to allow women deacons and
I,
whatnot.
I am so sick of that. I am so sick of that. I will bet that what you said was what I'm. In short, was what I'm about to say now, which is that no. There is some historical precedent. It does exist. Let's go ahead and study it if you want. That's not an endorsement of anything.
No, it's not.
I just and there is some historical precedent. It's unusual and it's vague and It's
Yeah, I was explaining the whole what exactly was a deaconess, and I explained that the word deacon means servant. That in fact, the first time we see it in the gospel is in the wedding of Cana. The waiters are referred to as deacons in diakonos in Greek.
yes.
So that's the first time we see the word. But obviously they weren't clergy deacons; they were just servants. That was just the word that was used
Well,
at the time.
and that goes to a deeper thing for me, and I wrote an article on this, which I'll also send you if you want, where I examined several things on this. But the fact is that for the most part, as I see it, the women who are whining that they want the priesthood are demonstrating that they're
Yes.
not fit for it
Oh,
because
absolutely.
they are seeing it as a position of status when
Career
ultimately
or like a political statement.
yes, and and as a status thing because yes, okay, clericalism is a thing, and people do sometimes give too much deference to the clergy in certain ways. You can make that case, but ultimately it is a position of submission. It's a submission of complete submission. I mean, it really is. You get to stop having many of your own opinions if you enter the priesthood and go further up to the bishop level. You surrender even your own will. And I think whenever I see these arguments, it's like they're not getting that. They're really not getting it.
They're not. They're
Um,
not.
and in the meantime, if you look through church history, um, it is just littered with women saints. And I haven't done a formal survey, but my brief look is that priests and bishops make saints less often than the rest of us. They don't. They don't. The priesthood is a position of servants of complete service. I don't. So most of the making the so-called feminist arguments, if they weren't they're making the wrong arguments. They really are. They're making an argument that women deserve it because of title, because of status, because of it's just they're looking at it upside down, and that proves they don't get it. I don't know. Maybe if we had a few centuries of women just constantly leading the church, I don't know, but they're not showing me any reason that they even get what the priesthood is.
No, they do not. They do not. And I also went through not only explaining that the word and what it does now, and I just pretty much explained the role of the deaconess. It was pretty much like a helper of the priest of the bishop.
Well, yes, yes.
When a woman was beaten by her husband and she complained to the bishop, because again back in the day the church was the judge, jury, and executioner pretty much. So when the woman went to the bishop to complain, saying my husband beat me, whatnot, had these quote unquote deaconesses help in the investigation. The deaconess will go and see the woman naked and pinpoint the spots or the bruises, whatnot, and let the
Mhm.
bishop know that yes, because obviously it will be scandalous for a woman to just become nude in front of the bishop. So
Sure.
that was one of the roles of the deaconesses, was to pretty much situation of male and female together in
There,
a situation.
there appear. I looked at it a little bit, and there do appear to have been some cases in history where, like, you might have an abbess who also had that title,
Yes,
or
yes.
something like that. But even then, now you're looking at A, it's a little unusual, and B, it's not something you would still see in your everyday congregation. Um,
Yeah,
so
it was just the word that they had at the time. They didn't really have any other word for it. Pretty much, it's just that word meant servant, so they used it.
yeah,
Pretty much the thing. But as far as them being clergy, no evidence for that at all.
no, there's zero. There is zero, and
But of course, the media went and just went array with it, and the the so-called traditionalists in the church also had a problem. They turned against the Pope even more, saying, "Aha, we finally got him." nutcase trying to change the
Oh, come
church.
on. Come on.
Yeah,
No. Oh, yeah, it's
yeah.
exactly
There's
what I
some.
just said. Okay, hey, it's exactly what I just said. There is some historical precedence, and all right, some serious people in the church are asking me to have it studied. All right, we'll study it. If you're a good Catholic, you hope that study will take a good 50 or 60 years, but let them study it. That last part was only kind of a joke, but not really, because when I look at the current state of feminism today, and when I look at what feminists did, like to other branches of Christianity, like they destroyed the Anglican Communion. I mean, they just completely wrecked it. And people just streaming out the doors. Like, you think people are leaving Catholicism because of the sex scandals? Oh my goodness, the Anglicans it's been a disaster for them. Same for the Lutherans. It's been disastrous.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I'm sorry, I'm perfectly willing to grant that there may be some women somewhere out there who are ideal, but the church doesn't need to be risking it because, again, it's not about status and power anyway. It really isn't. Um, so, you know, concentrate on leading by example. The church is filled with women who led by example who are far more influential in many ways in this world. Mother Teresa is
Oh,
the most
definitely.
obvious recent example,
Oh,
but they're
definitely.
all over the church. Um,
Yeah, the greatest Catholic is the Blessed Virgin Mary. I mean,
that's right. That's
the
right.
woman.
That's exactly right.
So I mean, it's not.
And
It shouldn't be a competition. Like, man, I mean, come on, it shouldn't be a competition at all.
it's
People
not.
see it that way. I say, yeah, it's not fair that we can't be priests. Well,
It's not
that's not what
fair.
the priesthood is about.
Not about fair.
I heard that argument. Say it is not fair, and I've heard it from nuns. Nuns tell me this. Say it is
Nuns,
not fair.
really? Really?
Yeah,
Not
nuns
fair.
telling me,
Ladies, did you want to be Catholic? I mean, really? That
yeah.
surprises me just a little.
I
Only
remember
because
going
I
to a
know
retreat.
Go ahead. I want to hear
I,
this.
I, I remember going to a retreat a couple years ago, and there was these nuns there. Like each group of us, we had to make like a prayer to offer, like a little rite, just to make it up as part of the retreat. Well, when it was their turn to do their rite or whatever ritual, whatever. I mean, it was just great. They changed the Our Father said Our Mother. It said Glory be to the Eternal One. And, I mean, they did not want to acknowledge any masculinity at all. Crazy. It was like a new age thing.
And I,
And these were nuns, Franciscan nuns.
I have spent the last few years heavily involved in gender politics, and talking about men and men's rights issues. And one of the things that's come stunningly to me is um, at least when it comes to feminists, there is literally no place that feminists won't stop asking. There's no place they'll stop. They'll just keep asking until they're given everything they want. And in fact, what happens with ideological feminists is, seriously, every time they want to get something, they want more and they want more and they want more. In this country, it's reached the point. It's reached the point where actually the average young woman makes more money per hour than the average young man does among the under 30s. And so we're up to 65% of college graduates now are women. And they keep calling that more equality and demanding still more programs to help women in college. This is happening right now, um,
Hmm.
which says that there's something in feminism and probably some part of female nature that on some levels just won't stop asking if you don't say no. That just find something more. And that isn't even saying something negative about female nature, because there are things where men just will not stop saying, not stop asking till they get their way too. But I mean, I mentioned I wrote an article recently on, is the Pope a socialist or a feminist, where I addressed this. And the first thing I got into was the socialist thing, and I mentioned Catholic social teaching and the basics of it, right? Which means Catholics will always be opposed. Good Catholics will always be critical of communism, socialism, capitalism. Be critical of all of it. And on feminism, I noted the deep irony. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not wrong. Have you heard of Christina Hoff Sommers and what they call equity feminism?
Yes.
All right. And my contention is that except for her occasional endorsement of like chivalry and stuff like that, um, Catholicism basically is equity feminism, because if you look at the history of 2,000 years of the church, except for the priesthood, there's no rules on what women can or can't do. I mean, they're supposed to be married if they're having sex and all that, but really, if a woman can rise, if she's not called to be a mother and she can rise to some other position, there's no limit. She can be a queen, she can be a priest, she can be a, or not, can't be a priest, she could be a queen, she could be a president, she could be a, it's not relevant.
Exactly. Or start their own order.
Start their own order, become a saint, lead the whole church just by example. I outside the church, even if she wants to be the CEO of a company, the church president of the Saint Jadwiga of Poland ruled Poland in her own name. There's literally no cap on what you could. So feminists are just full of crap, is what I'm saying. This is the only place where we say no, and it seems to matter to me that we be able to say no here. It's that way for a
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah, I was explaining that in the beginning of the broadcast that I was explaining a bit about the holy orders. Why even thinking of having women deacons in the clerical sense is impossible, and it has to do with the sacrament itself, the form and the matter. The form is the laying of the hands by the bishop on the male candidate and the anointing of the hands. That's the form of the formula. And the matter is the male body. So that has to be ordained. It can't be the bishop can't ordain a cup or a dog. It has to be a male. That's the matter of the sacrament. It's like with the form is the prayer consecration. Take this and eat, etc., etc. The matter is the bread and the wine. Kool-Aid. You can't use an Oreo cookie because that's not the matter. The matter has to be a male person, a male
That's right.
body.
Man doesn't get to get pregnant. And no, not every woman is ever going to. Not every woman's going to get pregnant, and not every man's going to be a priest. So again, what's your argument? I actually think there's a certain strength in this, because one of the things I've noticed about men, and I do look at men and men's issues a lot, is men pretty instinctively tend to do what women ask them to do. We joke about it,
Yes.
but it's true. It's extremely true, especially in this culture, but I think everywhere. I think the more female dominated a society is, the more unstable it is. This is why neighborhoods dominated by single mothers are also neighborhoods dominated. And at some level, uh, uh, men will just give women whatever they want. And one of the reasons, I think, really, I mean, this isn't theological, it's just necessarily, it's more my personal view. If you don't give men areas where they just get to put their foot down and say no, families fall apart, society falls apart, the church would fall apart. Because the wives or the women submit remark that St. Paul makes in, what was that, Corinthians? I can't remember off the top of my head. We reminded women to submit.
Yes.
That's not an order to obey your man in all things, because actually no woman who ever lived, well, except maybe Mary did, no, no woman who ever lived obeyed her husband in all things every time, every minute of every day, or looked at him as her captain and she's his submissive subordinate. No, it doesn't actually work that way. The point is that actually women do get what they want most of the time, but giving men the ability to put their foot down and say no sometimes, I'm sorry, they need to be able to do it. You know what I mean? Or am I talking out my butt?
Yeah, that's exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and that doesn't mean we don't love women. It doesn't mean women aren't equal. It means they're different. Uh, and actually, I think there's some real truth to that too. Yes, there are great women leaders, but men naturally tend more towards certain types of leadership, and women tend to be more comfortable with it too. Have you noticed that? In fact, I give you a challenge. Ask every woman you know. Go ask 20 women. Do you like male bosses or female bosses better? About 70% of them will tell you, oh, I hate working for a woman. Now, if women feel that way instinctively, even if they are seeing the priesthood as a status position, it should immediately put a chill through them. Because really, the majority of women, I've seen surveys too, but I've also asked around, even among liberal women who call themselves feminists, if they're alone and you get them alone, they say, oh God, I hate working for women. There's something in the natural order there. You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean
Yeah.
men need are brutal tyrants, or the women. Men do what women ask all the time. Have you noticed? We don't even need to be taught to do it. We just kind of do it because there are moms and there are wives, and you know. So yeah, there you go. I'll send you the article. I think you'll like it, because I think one of the things
Yeah.
that's been getting me, and I see in like in the reaction to feminism, conservative right wingers are embracing embracing chivalry. I mean, openly they're calling it chivalry, right?
Yeah.
And chivalry is also heretical nonsense. We'll call it right out. It's heresy. It arose. C.S. Lewis wrote about this actually. It arose like in 12th century France, and some people, in the church were kind of going along with it, but no, most church teaching has always been no, no, that's crazy. And you can find some of the great Catholic writers of history like Cervantes and Shakespeare. Well, some still try to argue, but it's pretty obvious to me Shakespeare was Catholic. All the evidence points to it. And others just, in their work, and Dante, you can see in their work, and Tolkien, C.S. Lewis wasn't Catholic, but he even panned it, right? It's this whole disorder putting women above men and exalting women above men. That's what chivalry does. That's where you get this stupid getting down on your knees and, uh, actually even the whole buy her a big diamond ring mentality. It's all disordered. It's all disordered. Um, Men and women are a complementary species, to use the Evo Psych jargon, um,
Yeah.
which is really another way of saying the principle of complementarity between men and women, which is standard Catholic teaching. Um, Nobody says your biology is destiny in the Catholic Church. If a woman doesn't want to be a stay at home mom, she doesn't have to. But if she's going to choose motherhood, she does have some obligations, some big time ones. So,
But today, especially with atheists, they seem to think that Christians want women to stay at home and almost that cartoon, the Flintstones on Wilma,
yeah, yeah.
stay at home and just do whatever Fred tells us to do, or something like that. That's just far from the truth.
It's always been far from the truth, is the thing. That is kind of a 1950s, 1960s sitcom stereotype. Women have always
Yeah.
worked. Women have always been given positions of authority. Where are they getting their
Yeah.
history from?
Like I said, a lot of professors, I say this a lot of professors love to pontificate to students, not educate them. They like to pontificate to them and give them of history, their version of philosophy and whatnot. And
Women have never
unfortunately,
been Women have never been oppressed. It's a myth. Women's oppression is a myth, at least within the Catholic faith. I'm sorry, it doesn't exist. They've always had
even
power,
today,
respect, authority. Huh?
even today, I mean, if you say that you're pro-life, you're automatically a woman hater,
Well,
a
and you know
misogynist.
what's so demonic about that accusation is that even if you all you got to do is go to a pro-life rally and count the heads, count the women, count the men. It'll usually be more women than men.
More women, yeah.
And also if you look at national surveys, at least in the United States, more women are strong pro-life than men. Not by a lot, but it's something like 30% women are strong pro-life and 25% of men, sort of thing, right? It's just like it's actually very dishonest to portray it as like men's oppression of women. It really
It
is.
is. It is. Like I said, it's just a spin that they use to try to brainwash the naive, and they, I mean, it's just
And it's funny to
crazy.
me too because I've had women who aren't even religious. They find out I'm Catholic and they'll just kind of whisper to me like it's a secret. By the way, I'm pro-life. I know a woman's right and all, but I just can't. I'm pro-life. I'm like, it's okay. You can. I wish she'd be more loud about it, but that's okay. Uh, it's not a man versus woman thing. It's a sanctity of life
It's
thing.
not
It's just really it's
exactly.
not. In fact, it's on the whole church to try and support that woman if she makes a mistake. But she should acknowledge it was a mistake because single motherhood's a bad idea. And the
Yes,
reason and the reason, yeah, I mean, you don't toss her out of the church for it, but there's a reason we say casual sex. Just looked at it from a clinical perspective, it's clearly not good for you. Take out the theological aspect if you must. Just look at it. Look what casual sex does to people. It's not
no, I
good.
mean, look at
It's
the.
really not.
It's a new disease appearing. I mean,
That's right. And you get
it's
unwanted
just scary, and
pregnancies, and all these unwanted pregnancies, which either result in abortion or difficulties for society because women, single motherhood is a disaster. We should all be able to acknowledge it by now. It's a disaster.
yeah. A couple weeks ago, I saw on the news, Jersey program where now firehouses and centers, I think, and police stations, they now made a hole in the wall with like this receptacle. Women can just leave a baby in there and lock it up. And I was
There is
watching
good
that news.
reasoning behind that, but go ahead.
I was just watching that news, and I was like thinking to myself, "This is how we got this to this point. The
Yes.
the
It's
baby is
ridiculous.
so worthless that you just put it in like you ever see, in the bank when you have those deposit boxes, so you just drop the deposit in there and you close it up
Well,
right on the side of the
actually,
building.
reluctantly, although I get what you're saying for sure, I would point out that um, there is a problem with and nobody likes to speak of it, but it's found in every culture. It's been going on for thousands of years. Some women, especially single mothers, will dump the kid in a dumpster, um, strangle it, whatever. That's a known thing that women will do. Uh, uh, you know, Obviously not most women, just like most men would never do such a thing, but it's a noted thing. And so it did used to be. This is why we had, you know, You used to see it in old movies and stories too. Infants left at a church door, or infants left at a someplace like that because the mother couldn't care for it. So I mean, no, I mean, there's all kinds of problems with it, but it's. I'm actually glad they're doing it because those babies might wind up in
Yeah,
dumpsters
I'm glad.
otherwise,
Uh,
but it does say something.
Second idea. Obviously, I prefer the baby to be alive and safe, but I'm just saying that society got to this point,
Yeah.
to the idea of bundle of joy.
Well,
When I found out my
yeah.
sister was pregnant with my nephew,
Mm.
I mean, I was excited. I felt like I was pregnant, excited because I'm gonna have a nephew. I mean,
It
it was
is.
just like, oh my god, it was like I won the lottery. I'm gonna have a nephew. I'm gonna be an uncle.
Uh,
And then when the niece came, I mean, even better. Now I have a nephew and a niece. And just to hear this news that you could just put a baby in this thing on the wall, and I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's scary how society has gotten.
to me, it has. I mean, okay, there've always been there've always been tragedies in the world. Woman gets raped, or even, has an indiscretion, has a baby she can't take care of. That's been going on for that. That's as long as there've been civilization, right? But it's more common now. It's more prevalent now, and I think that's because as a whole culture, we've just normalized this. And you know what I think part of it is too is not exactly a race issue, but in the U.S. it would be rich white people, but in other countries it started with at other levels. Rich people want the freedom of the birth control and the I can handle it mentality. And the truth is that everybody who's not wealthy and educated is not so easily cushioned from those bad choices. You know what I'm saying? A woman who grew up on the wrong side of the tracks without a good family in the first place, who falls pregnant because everybody told her she'd be an empowered woman exploring her sexuality, but she wasn't responsible. She didn't use the birth control right, or it failed, or whatever. You see all these young women and they're miserable. Maybe they become single mothers, maybe they don't, but they're giving away their sexuality. Um, and it creates a culture of nihilism that's especially
Really.
brutal on the poor. It's especially brutal on the poor, and it creates these broken families that actually make poverty worse. I mean, the number one predictor of poverty is single motherhood, right?
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
it is. It is. I mean, this is part of the political stuff work I do. I used to do a lot of work on this. It's not deniable. You want more poverty, get more single mothers. You want more single mothers, encourage everybody to just fuck and say it's all good
Yeah.
just because it feels good. And if you use the rubber right, you'll be safe, which no, you won't. But
Yeah, that's now that you mentioned the rubber, I was reading the paper the other day, last week. This whole thing with the Zika virus, and now it's
uh,
spreading in Mexico. And then I read that the United States is sending troops, and I'm thinking, what is that going to do to prevent the virus? Why not send them sunscreen? I mean, not sunscreen, bug spray, or those nets that you put around your bed. I mean, they're gonna wrap the whole bodies in them and walk around.
it's like an
I mean, come on.
ideological thing. It's like an ideological thing for people. I mean, they bash the church for having its strong stand on saying birth control is bad for you, but last I checked, the church, at least here, is not telling you you can't have birth control. They're saying that is bad for you and you shouldn't do that. And the flip side of theirs seems to be like the reverse sacrament, which is you have to use birth control. It's an automatic good. I mean,
Yeah,
what you just did illustrated the height of absurdity of it. It's so good. We'll just use it to cure viruses to people who
yeah.
are sick. We'll just
Just,
condoms.
I had to
Like, I'm
go
sorry.
again just to make sure I had to read it again, the article, just to make sure I was understanding correctly what was being said.
Because
They were using condoms to fight this virus.
because to some extent the virus is sexually transmitted.
Yeah, after the bite, but I mean, stop the bite. That's what you should be doing. Prevent
After
the bite from happening. Random cancer bug spray and DEETs and whatever products exist out there to prevent bugs from condoms. I mean, come on.
it will go because yeah, right. Yeah, right. I get what you're saying. It's not a. It's an airborne virus, or it can transmit multiple ways, right?
No, you get it first by a mosquito bite.
Yeah,
That's how
right.
you
So
get.
yeah, so they're being ridiculous. They're
Yeah,
being ridiculous.
they are
And
very
that doesn't
ridiculous.
even if it were sexually transmitted, okay, maybe you send them, maybe, but you should still be straight up acknowledging these things break and these things fall off and these things fail. And you can sit there and be all self-righteous and say, not if used correctly, their rate of success is, yeah, right, everybody's going to use it correctly. No, how about telling them this is not, I'm sorry, casual sex isn't good for you. It's dangerous. Everybody I know who's indulged in more than a little of it winds up with problems. Not really.
Definitely.
And I'm not being, and people will call me judgmental, but that's getting it backwards. I call it discernment. Everybody and by the way, I came into the faith only 8 years ago, and I'm almost 50. I was not a sexually continent man per se, although I was never one of those guys who just sleeps around constantly. But I was certainly sexually active, as they say, and not in ways the church would approve of. But the more hedonistic and more sex chasing the people I knew, the more sexually transmitted diseases and other problems they had. I mean, it's like you can just look and talk to them, and you're still there. Of course you're still their friends, and of course you still love them. But why would you not point out, oh, except, what, 25% of the population, the adult population now has herpes simplex too? Something like that? 20% maybe? And then you've got all the hepatitis C, you've got all the, syphilis, gonorrhea we already know about. I mean, and a host of smaller diseases nobody knows about. Nobody even remembers herpes anymore, I guess because it's so common. But I mean, syphilis, people don't even remember it, even though it's really quite deadly. And it's not minor. Yes, you can cure it with antibiotics, but get 2 or 3 cases of it in your lifetime. I've talked to people, there's people out there that's happened to. This is not a healthy lifestyle, even if you're an atheist. Come on, what? If you were straight up hardcore atheist, what would possess you to think the world's a good place with people just randomly screwing all the time? All the evidence to me points the other way. Just the scientific evidence alone points the other way.
Read a blog post on this that new studies show that the rate of HIV in more men, because there's so much promotion of condom use in the community, and yet it still keeps on getting more numbers, more people getting infected. And now what first that pill, that blue pill.
You're breaking up, Sacer. I think that's you.
Can you hear me now?
That seems better.
Yeah, like I was saying, there was a study that was released saying that increasing even more among homosexual men.
Oh, yeah.
So much promotion of condom use is given to that community, and despite this, increased infection. What's making it worse is now they have this pill called PrEP pill called, which supposedly the person takes it to infection. So now you have all these. Yeah, you have all these homosexual men taking these and believing that they all of a sudden become Superman and cannot be.
Yeah,
worse.
and loose with AIDS statistics, but even then, I've talked to public health officials because AIDS is a very political disease, so they play football with it. But if you look at government figures and you talk to people who work in the field of I don't know, treating, people in emergency rooms and in clinics, and what's really going on, all those diseases are more prevalent and growing, and they're especially high in the gay male community. They just are. And I can tell you why it is. It isn't. I can give you a scientific reason why it is. The average Catholic hopefully will. Hopefully, we know not everybody is going to succeed, but hopefully will only ever have sex with with their husband or wife. Period. You know. But even if you fail in that ideal, as some of us have, uh, I can tell you that without a condom is better. It just is. And anybody who says otherwise is lying to you. And it's sex sucks with a condom for most people, not just for the man, but for the woman too. And they still fall off. They still break. You still, even when you put them on correctly and do everything exactly what you're supposed to, which not everybody does. And now you're in a hedonist lifestyle, which is hedonism, by the way, isn't even about sex. Hedonism can be falling into
Yeah,
video
any
games
type
and
of pleasure.
porn, and yeah, just going after pleasure for pleasure's sake. That's hedonism. And anytime you're in a hedonist lifestyle, you're drinking and you're fucking and you're having fun. Fucking being the modern word for fornicating. It's the same word. It's every time you start getting excited, and you're not going to always put the condom on right. You're not always going to remember the birth control pill. These things, there's one safe way. Either keep it in your pants or have monogamous sex with one person for your whole life. I'm sorry, that's just biological reality. You'll be safer. And studies have shown married couples who stayed married their whole life usually report having more frequent and pleasurable sex than people who screw around. So this again is just the science.
Yeah.
So why is Catholic teaching so evil then? If you do it our way, you'll probably have a more stable life and a more prosperous one, probably.
Definitely. I mean, you see all the disasters ever since the sexual revolutions of the 60s. I mean, the family is just, I mean, it's just been destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, before the sexual revolution, everything was more stable. I mean, obviously there were problems there, of course there were problems, but not to the extent that we see today.
I know. And it's not, I'm not saying that we should necessarily go back to making all these things illegal and putting people in jail per se, but the attitude, just the constant cultural drumbeat of, this is what makes you happy, this is what's fulfillment, this is freedom, this is freedom, this is liberty. It's like, really? Okay. Look at everybody you know who lives that way, and all right, Keith Richards is still alive. I'll give you that. But look at most people who live that way and how they end up. And that's consequences of self-destructive behavior. That's what it is. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
be some kind of, I'm here because Jesus saved me fundamentalist, but I'm just saying, no, look at what the church teaches, and look what happens when people don't do that. Sorry, it's pretty obvious most of the time.
For Francis to release Amoris Laetitia, where he addresses the way the family exists today. And again, like I said, with the deaconesses, in cultural tradition people, went after the Pope, saying, "Oh, the Pope is becoming a modernist and is approving of all say sins and living in sin situations and whatnot." And these people they didn't bother to read. When it came out, I read it 3 times. Said it before I wrote a post on it. And most of these people that are on blogs and whatnot, they listen to what the media said, and the Pope. And it's just you look at the document itself, endorsing, and he's just acknowledging the reality of what's going on, and he's giving how
Yeah,
priests, pastors should deal with this situation.
yeah,
People, even within the Catholic Church, they just saw a couple headlines and they just came out with all these crazy conclusions regarding the Pope and whatnot, and whether or not he's going to allow communion for the divorce. He did not. He doesn't even mention it in the giving any okay
he
for it
didn't
in the
even
document.
mention. I was actually confused by that. I read that report saying something about communion for divorced people, and I'm like, I haven't gone back to find out what he actually said, because I can tell right away there's something wrong with that phrasing. There's something immediately wrong with even the phrasing communion for the divorced.
Yeah.
Um, Divorced people actually can take communion. And the last I checked, what they're not allowed to do is
If
if
they're not
they are
married.
if they haven't remarried, or yeah, exactly, or if they're in a committed sexual relationship with someone, now you have a complex situation. But you can take communion when you're divorced. In fact, I happen to know statistically a large number of divorces are not voluntary. And from what I can tell, this is actually an area where I'm critical of the church. And by the church, I don't mean necessarily the bishops, although they could help, but the laity, even laity leadership and pastors and such. People don't seem to be aware that, at least in this country, women file most divorces. And I have dealt with countless men who were divorced because their wife divorced them and they didn't want it. And somehow those men have gotten the message that they're not welcome in church, or that it's automatically their fault if there's a divorce. This is one thing I want to talk to other Catholics about, because there's a lot of those guys out there. They say only women keep the church going. Well, sometimes we are failing to notice that things are happening and they're not always voluntary. Uh, and yes, with women, but also, especially in this culture, it's usually men who have unwanted divorces and they need support. Um, they need it in a big way. And they need to be hearing, well, of course you're still welcome in church. In fact, if your wife is leaving you, you need to come to church more often. We need to, uh, are you hearing me? Am I
Exactly.
making sense? Did that all make sense? I hope it did. Was I ranting too much? Are you
Oh
there?
no, go ahead.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I mean, that's just all I was saying. So, what did he actually say about communion for the divorce? Because I knew something had to be wrong, because communion for the divorce just doesn't sound right. What was he actually talking about?
Well, he was situation that there are people find themselves in certain situations that they can't really do anything about it. But he never gave the okay for it. What I'm saying is that
Yeah,
these
well,
so-called conservative Catholics or traditionalists were saying that he did give the okay for it. He did not. Document that I find it, and they even tried to
no. Well,
using
and
they try to use a
okay.
footnote to make a case.
I get tired of that from the anti Catholics and the so called traditionalists.
Yeah, the footnote what that they used was he was quoting from Evangelic Gaudium, where he says that The Eucharist is not a prize for the perfect, but a powerful medicine and nourishment for the weak. So they took that footnote and they said, "Oh, he left it open,
Oh, for
meaning
Pete's
for
sake.
those who remarry." And that's not what he was intending. He was just quoting. He was just reiterating the importance of the sacrament.
And
Uh,
this is why the church even has annulment in the first place. I mean, it's a sad thing how many there are, but it's why they're there. So, I mean, why are they not hearing this? If you divorced but you're not remarried, you're fine. Um, and actually, everybody who knows you got divorced unwillingly should support you. You're not remarried, and there's an annulment process. So maybe it's not perfect, but what are they talking about? I'm divorced, and I'm a faithful Catholic. How did that happen? Oh, I did the work of getting the annulment and had to go through the painful process of looking at where I had failed and why I was not fit to take that sacrament in the first place. And I rightly had to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of talking to the church about it. So, again, what are they talking about? It sounds like they just hate the guy or something. They must. And they just
this is
jump on
exactly
anything.
what they don't like this pope. They do not like it. They cannot stand him.
It happens. It happens with every pope, I think.
It started exactly when he came out the balcony to use the mosetta, which is that red cape around. Pope Benedict used it a lot.
And he doesn't wear the red shoes either.
Yeah, the master ceremonies came up to him with the mosetta and told him, here it is, get ready to go outside. And he told the Monsignor, you put it on. I didn't want to wear it.
Okay.
The white cassock.
May I remind people that this man is a consecrated. He's a monk. He's a monk. And actually, he's Pope and he gets whatever style he wants, right? I mean, he's the Pope. If he wanted to dress like a Generalissimo, he could. But, I mean...
Theoretically, yes. As a matter of fact, the cassock, the white cassock that the Pope uses is the Dominican habit.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where it came from.
And he's a Jesuit monk. He's a monk.
The Jesuit,
isn't he? Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Wait a minute. Is he a monk?
Well, not those monks, but it's just
he is a Jesuit. Okay, never mind. I take that back. He lives in the monastery, though. There's a monastery in the Vatican, and he lives in that. That's where he sleeps most of the time.
And the Jesuits, they do take about poverty. This is a religious order, and but he ever since he refused to wear the regalia, I think that's when the hate started. I think they interpreted it as a in your face. But that's not what he was intending. It's just his style. He likes to be simple.
He does, and that is his style. And frankly, I embrace it. I don't know. I have real trouble with any of those so-called traditionalist Catholics who call everybody else the Novus Ordo. I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't like me because I'm a convert who came in after Vatican II anyway. But they seem to be caught up in the style rather than the substance. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
The Pope still Pope if he's naked, guys. I mean, really. I actually think it's a good thing that he is setting a tone away from. I don't think it was wrong for historic popes to have the tiaras and the very fancy. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Even when you look at the Eastern Orthodox. Huh?
Something important. That's what I mean. It's not that the Pope is is being all flashy or whatnot. Is that these things represent God, the church,
Yes,
the
when
faith.
when other popes and others choose more advanced stuff, more fancy formal stuff, they're making one kind of statement. Francis is making another kind of statement that is equally
Exactly.
valid. It's not less. It's not more valid. Um,
No.
in certain times and places, the most appropriate style is to inspire people with grand, fancy garb like that, like the historic, like you saw in other popes. And in other times, and I think a good one for this time is more toward a more humble style. That's a good
Yeah.
Christly example too. I
That's what I was telling one of them when the Pope was elected. They cannot stamp Pope Francis. And I said, well, I mean, God sends the right man for the right time. Patient. I mean, the church is not something that we own. We have no. We're not stockholders in the church. Right to say how the church should be or shouldn't be.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I truly appreciate about this Pope that he chooses this way, and that he chooses to live in with the monks, and that he chooses to cook most of his meals. I appreciate this about him. That doesn't make him a Bolshevik. It's more actually, we're almost being silly because the best comparison is Saint Francis of Assisi, which is who he named himself for. He is living and he's acting like a Franciscan. I mean, he really is. He's acting like a Franciscan in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't know if he keeps the whole, but you know what I mean?
He is. He is. It's like he grew up in a Franciscan order.
I almost. and and actually, I was reading an article about Saint Francis of Assisi recently, and they pointed out that Saint Francis of Assisi was not popular in his day. Uh, he was, he had a strict vow of poverty that he lived by, and he was highly critical of the rich, and he was, people called him smug, arrogant, condescending, judgmental. They really opposed and hated him. One of the reasons he's saying is he stood up to all that and stood firm on this was the example he wanted to live by. So maybe we should take it as a given. Some people won't like Francis. After all, some people didn't like Saint Francis. So how about that? Actually, I really would ask those. Hello? You seem to be gone. I guess I was going to say I would really like to ask those Pope Francis haters what they think of Saint Francis of Assisi, because it seems to me like he's at least trying to live up to that same example, and there's nothing invalid about it. Sorry if I'm pontificating. Hey, that's a pretty good joke, actually, isn't it? I'm pontificating about the Pope. Are you still there, man? Are we still live? Sounds like we lost each other. Hey. Oh well, I guess I'll see you later, man.
Yes. Hello. We seem to be having some technical difficulties again. I think I'm back online right now. Try to get Dean again. Okay, we seem to be having some technical difficulty. Google is acting up again. This time boot us off the air, but now I think we're back on. So just waiting for Dean to see if he's able to connect again. Um,
Oh, missed you.
we can continue the discussion regarding Pope Francis.
Sorry if I
And
was talking too much, man.
it tells me to reconnect, and it's just Google because Twitter's working. I have Twitter running in the background, and Google Plus, Google Hangouts rather, that just disconnects. Everything else works. If I go to my page, it loads fine. Connection problem. Something with Google. I don't know. Okay, we're having technical difficulties here. Please stand by as I try to figure out why Google keeps knocking me off the air. I get Dean back on.
Still trying, man? Keep having these
Okay,
technical
you're back,
glitches.
right?
I am back. Yeah. You're just having so many technical
Yeah,
difficulties.
yeah.
I actually kind of want to go to bed actually, but I've enjoyed talking. I
Right.
hope I didn't. I hope I didn't talk too much. Um, I know I was
I
kind of
was
punt.
looking forward to hear what you were saying, and then I just get you started breaking up, and then it just went
Uh,
connect
all right.
again. But everything else is working. I really don't understand. Twitter, I have Twitter in the background running,
You
like
should,
a
when you
thousand
have
tweets per
some
second.
time, you should have. You should talk to me sometime online, chat with me, or give me your phone. I can help you figure that out. Send me a message. I'll help you figure that out because I know I can help you fix that. I'm gonna go to bed though. Okay. God bless you, man.
Okay, likewise.
Have a good night.
Okay, so that was Dean again from last night, who was on Atheist Open Mic. Nice discussion on different things, the topic of deaconesses and things about the role of women and so forth. In time that I have left, I would like to just touch upon this post that um, is from the Theist versus Atheist group posted in the community Theist versus Atheist. I wanted to address because it appears that some of our Protestant friends showed up and are commenting on the post and also attacking church in the process. So I just wanted to address that briefly here, if I could get this thing to work. Hopefully you're able to see this, but the post that Angela Martin posted was she linked from crooksnow.com, abuse scandals multiply in post backyard of Latin America. And then she has her own comment on the evil of religion, in particular Catholic Christianity. The post 9 comments, as you can see here, and this person here, Emmanuel T, wrote Catholics are not Christian. Address that. Um, Catholics are in fact Christian, and Catholics are the original Christians. The Catholic Church was founded directly by Christ, as opposed to the other denominations out there, communities out there who were founded by men. Just to give a brief history, Christ founded the Catholic Church on Peter the Rock, changed his name from Simon to Peter, which means rock. He said, on this rock I'm going to build my church. Forward, Jesus had the passion, he died, rose from the dead, and so forth. Promised the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit came on Pentecost, which we celebrated 2 Sundays ago. And that was the birth of the church, the Catholic Church. And the Pope, the first leader of the church, was Peter. And you can find this in any encyclopedia, any historical book, history book. You can find this fact that Pope, and it went to Linus, etc., all the way down to Pope Francis right now. Now, the word Catholic means universal. That's what it means. And you could see that in the New Testament when Jesus tells the apostles to go baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. go throughout the whole world. That's Catholic, which means all over the world, the universal, everywhere. So that's why the church has the name Catholic. It's the church from all over the world, going throughout the whole world, doing what Jesus said, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And Peter, he was obviously the first pope, but he was a bishop as well, because all popes are bishops. And he ordained Irenaeus of Antioch. And Irenaeus of Antioch was the first recorded use of the word Catholic. He says that wherever Jesus Christ, wherever the bishop is, there's Jesus Christ. Wherever Jesus Christ is, there is the Catholic Church. That's what he said. And this man, he lived in the first century. He was a disciple of Peter, the first pope. So there's overwhelming evidence that the Catholic Church, church of the first century, was the same church you see today. With Pope Francis, it was the same thing in the, historically speaking, was the same thing in the first century. It may have looked a little bit different because it was the early church. It was developing. So you will not see the vestments that we use today, the popes with the mitres and all that. That came later on as the church started to develop more and started to organize more. And of course, we didn't have buildings. We didn't have church buildings then because it was illegal to be Christian. It was illegal to be a Catholic Christian. So there was no St. Michael Parish or St. Thomas Parish or St. Rose Parish. There was none of that back then. It wasn't until later on to the 4th century where Emperor Constantine converted. He became Catholic. And he gave the Pope of the time and the bishops the pagan temples. That's why in Rome you have the Church of St. Paul, where the Romans had their different gods, Jupiter, etc., Neptune, etc., etc. So Constantine handed over all those buildings to the Catholic Church, and that's when the idea of a church temple building came from. And then we just decorated it our way with the altar to represent the table of Christ, where Christ had the Last Supper, and the ideas of statues represented the different saints in the church, or different biblical stories are depicted in statues in stained glass windows, and then of course the pews so people could sit down. And little by little, the church started incorporating things here and there to make the church more ornate, more respectful of what it represents, or who it represents: God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And it started to develop from there. And we had the institution of the introduction of vestments, and then religious orders, and started to develop until what we have now in 2016. Now, the more organized church, headed Francis. But the original Christian church was the Catholic Church. Now, where these other so-called churches come from? Well, first, in 1054, there was a schism where the Eastern Orthodox Church separated from Rome on two issues: whether or not the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, which is called the Filioque, and whether the Pope really has authority over other bishops, or he's just an equal among equals. And those two issues are what's pretty much keeping these two factions divided. The main church, the real Christian church, is the Catholic Church. Now, the priesthood of the, because they just broke off from Rome, but hopefully one day they'll come back and it'll be united one Catholic Church with, of course, different rites. Now, even under the Catholic Church, there's over 20 different rites. And what I mean by rite is the way they celebrate the sacraments. The Byzantine rite, the Melkite rite, is the Roman rite. There's all different kinds of rites within the umbrella of the Catholic Church. So hopefully one day the Eastern Orthodox Church that continue to remain separated, hopefully one day they will come back, but they will be under Pope Francis or whoever the Pope is at the time of this unification. Now, centuries after that, in around the 1500s, a priest named Martin Luther came along. He was an Augustinian friar, and he found problems with the way the indulgences were being practiced. And pretty much an indulgence is the removal of temporal punishment. And temporal punishment is the punishment we deserve for our sins. When we go to confession and we confess our sins, we get absolved. The sins are washed away, they're cleansed, they're gone. But we still need to make up for those sins. We need to suffer to pay for those sins. So what the church has is the indulgences, just the merits of this Christ and the saints and so forth, which have amounted, and they apply that to the soul to remove the cruel punishment that we all deserve. So what was going on at the time was some people in the church, unfortunately, were selling these indulgences. They would say, "Give me so amount, and you'll get indulgence." And that's wrong. You're not supposed to sell indulgences. So some people were doing this in the church. Not all of them. Some people. So Martin Luther got upset and he protested, and apparently the bishop in his area didn't want to hear it because it was bringing in money. And so there was a corruption there. So Martin Luther got upset and he rebelled against the church and he started his own community, which eventually came to be the Lutheran community. And then that inspired other people, their own communities. When they saw that it was so easy to break away from Rome, which was very powerful then they started their own community. So you had the Anabaptists, the Baptists, the Presbyterians, the Episcopalian. The Episcopalian came out with Henry VIII, or he wanted a divorce. The Pope did not grant it because the Pope cannot divorce anybody. And he decided to make himself the leader of the church. So he created the Church of England. The Anglicanism Episcopalian community came from that scandal. But the other reformers came and they started their own groups, the Puritans, the Amish, now all the way down to Pentecostals, the Watchtower Jehovah's Witnesses, and so forth. All these different men came and they formed their own communities, mainly white European males. So that's why we have all these different communities out there, these different so-called churches. We don't call them churches because they're not churches, but we of course respect them as Christian communities, but come back to Rome and be united. But the original church, the original Christian church of Christ that Christ founded was the Catholic Church. It was not the Pentecostal Church. The Pentecostal Church is a little bit over 100 years old. It was founded in the United States, so nowhere near where Jesus Christ was born. And obviously, none of the apostles came to the United States to preach, so you could automatically disqualify Pentecostalism as man-made. And of course, the Watchtower, Charles Russell, who founded the Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, William Miller, I believe, was the name, with the Mormons. So for all of these things, all of these sects or cults were founded in the United States of America. So just a couple hundred years ago. So we could automatically disqualify these communities as being the original church. They're not. Not at all. Any of them who tell you this, they're pretty much fibbing. They're telling a lie. They are sinning against God because Satan is the father of lies. So these people shouldn't be telling they're the original Church of Christ and so forth. Because the original Church of Christ was anything else is a parody. No disrespect to my Protestant friends out there, but we got to tell the truth. Right from telling the truth. So I just wanted to touch on that. Hopefully you were able to see the screen, what I'm talking about, and Holy Christ founded was the Catholic Church. I guess the Catholic open mic. I want to thank all my listeners out there. all the people who wrote in and for a brief conversation on different topics. Hopefully, the next Catholic Open Mic, I'll get more Catholics on to have discussion, bring up new topics, and enjoy just discussing the faith, the Catholic faith, and whatnot. And everyone a happy Memorial Day weekend and be safe. Don't party too hard. Don't drink and drive. Don't text and drive. And just take care of one another. God bless and Mary keep. And remember, we're about to celebrate Corpus Christi, the solemnity of the body and blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, which around the world, especially in Rome, was celebrated on Thursday, but in the United States and other nations, we celebrate it today, on Sunday, the Sunday after Trinity Sunday, Holy Trinity, the solemnity of the Holy Trinity. So again, thank you for listening. God bless and Mary keep.